Well, a very good morning to you. People in their late 40s are expected to be next in line to book their COVID vaccine after the announcement of the next phase of jabs will begin in the coming days. All over 50s in England have now been offered a vaccine. So it's expected people in their late 40s will be next in line to start being inoculated, with invitations starting in the coming days. The NHS has confirmed 95% of people in the 9 most vulnerable groups have now been vaccinated. That's ahead of target. The Moderna vaccine rollout starts in England today. The UK has ordered 17 million doses. That's enough for 8.5 million people. It comes as the largest surge testing operation so far takes place in parts of South London after more than 70 confirmed or probable cases of the South African variant of COVID-19 were detected.
That's fantastic news that we're going to have met the target to vaccinate groups 1 to 9. That means that the highest risk population in the country are vaccinated and will have protection from severe disease and hospitalisation. Got a long way to go. The next group coming forward, group 10, the 40 to 50-year-olds, really need to step forward and take the vaccination when they're offered.
Well, celebrations for the easing of lockdown restrictions went on well into the night in towns and cities across England, with people making the most of their newfound freedoms. But there is a warning this morning from NHS leaders not to become complacent. Milena Veselinovic reports.
They danced well into the night, the joy of emerging from lockdown palpable, filling out streets and squares. All day, people packed tables across the country, relishing the newly restored sense of normality.
So fabulous, so exciting after a year of being locked in.
Oh, it feels great. Yeah, it's amazing. There's nothing like it.
Are you concerned at all about COVID?
Yes, to a certain extent I am, obviously, but if you're taking the necessary precautions, you should be fine.
From Stockton-on-Tees.
You want to let your hair down, so, even though I've had a haircut this morning.
I'm ready for the pints and the shots and the food, so...
to Oxford. And London. Venues stage yet another reopening of this pandemic, each previous one ending in shutdowns.
We start something off, we get into a momentum, and then we stop again. It's the stop-start issue. But it needed to be done. But we felt like we've been restarting a couple of times. We have no sense of momentum there.
But yet again, customers flocked back despite the chilly weather.
There's a real party atmosphere here and optimism that things are finally back on track. And everyone here hopes that after 3 long lockdowns, these hard-won freedoms are here to stay.
The PM has urged the nation to be cautious, as the largest surge testing operation to date is underway in South London because of cases of the South African variant. Scientists warn we still need to be careful.
We've all sacrificed so much over the last few months, and it is a joyous day. It's a step, and an important step, on the roadmap to freedom. So I think it's a joyous day, but also a day where perhaps we do also need to operate with some degree of caution.
On the streets, the party was in full swing late into the night, amid hope that this important step on the road to reopening will be irreversible. Milena Veselinovic, Sky News.
Well, the largest surge testing operation to date is taking place today in parts of South London, where a cluster of cases of the South African variant have been found. Well, let's head over to our reporter, Becky Cottrell. And just how big an operation is this going to be, Becky?
Well, as you say, it's the largest surge testing operation to have been undertaken in the country. What they're advising is anyone over the age of 11 who lives in, works in or travels through these 2 boroughs, Lambeth and Wandsworth in South London, to come forward and get a PCR test. You can actually pick up one from 8 a.m. from Lambeth Town Hall behind me, as well as other locations across the area. Those in-person pickups are for people with no symptoms. If you have symptoms, you should order one online and take it at home. It needs to be a PCR PCR tests, because those tests can then be sent off to a specialist lab, undergo genomic sequencing to look for variants of concern, like the South African variant, to see just how widely spread it might be here. So concerning news there, but good news for the vaccine rollout. Those top 9 cohorts have been offered their vaccine, and now we expect the under 50s to get their letters to come forward in the coming days. We expect it to proceed the vaccine rollout as it has done already, oldest to youngest, and the government are hoping to vaccinate all adults by the end of July.
OK, Becky, thank you. Well, let's have a look at the latest COVID figures for you. And 3,568 new COVID-19 cases have been recorded, along with 13 more deaths across the UK. That takes the total number of people who've died within 28 days of a positive test to 127,100. More than 32 million first doses of a vaccine have been given. The number of people getting a second dose is now over 7.6 million. Well, let's talk to Professor of Paediatrics at the University of Bristol, Adam Finn. I know you're clearly a member of the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation as well, which is crucial as we talk. Look, can we talk about the vaccination figures at this stage? Because we are ahead of target. How important is that milestone?
I think it's an enormously significant milestone, Stephen, because this really represents the culmination of phase 1, which was really aimed at trying to rescue the NHS from the enormous surge of cases that we had at the beginning of the year. Of course, the lockdown has contributed very significantly to that success as well. But we're halfway up the hill, if you like. We can look back and be pleased with what we've achieved, but we need to look forward to get to the summit and really finish this off.
I mean, part of the success story, you know, when we look at the figures, has been the take-up of the vaccine, which has been extraordinarily high for both first and second doses. Is there concern that that may drop off the younger the demographic is that's being targeted?
Well, I think we've certainly got an important job to do to communicate the importance of the vaccination programme to younger people. They perhaps have less fear of this disease than older people quite understandably have had. But nevertheless, I think people can be helped to understand that the ultimate exit from this catastrophe involves building up immunity in the population. What's happened up until now is that we've had this virus everywhere in our population because no one initially had any immunity at all. We need to get to a point where so many people are immune to it that the virus is left with nowhere to go. And that means that younger people do need to come forward in large numbers, as older people have done, in order to achieve that goal.
But as we've got this surge testing underway in London at the moment, what sort of problems are going to be caused by new variants coming in, even if we are vaccinated, or the majority of us are vaccinated? A new, potentially dangerous variant still going to cause us a problem?
Well, that is obviously a concern. I think the evidence we've got so far suggests that these vaccines do have activity and protection against the other virus variants that have emerged around the world. But we are going to probably have to modify the vaccines to keep up with that viral evolution as time goes by. Nevertheless, the more people who receive vaccines for now, the better control we'll have over the viruses that are circulating, and we'll also be able to retard the speed with which the virus can evolve and escape. So it's really a bit of a race against the virus. The faster we can get more people immune, the less of a problem these variants will be.
How big a step is it that Moderna's coming on stream in England today to get another vaccine available to people?
Well, really useful to have yet another tool in the toolbox, and there are more tools to come. So a really important next step. We've been told that the government has contracted with a number of different manufacturers for vaccines, and to see a third one come through to add to the two we have already is certainly very reassuring. And I think another step along the way towards a comprehensive program that can really protect us all.
How difficult is it moving forward for us now? Because obviously we're giving ourselves a pat on the back for the vaccine programme, and understandably so. But there is now this great concern when you look at countries like Chile that's had this hugely successful vaccine rollout, but is now seeing a big spike in cases. Now, clearly, we've got a different environment, a different demographic to Chile, but are there lessons that we can learn from what's happening there?
Absolutely right. I think we do need to understand exactly what's going on in Chile. It may relate to the vaccines used there and the viruses circulating there. But I think the message for us is that we can't now relax and assume that the problem is finished. We need to continue to be vigilant. We need to use all the tools, not just vaccines. There are now new tests available to people. They can test themselves to be vigilant for the virus. And even though we've been told that we can relax in our cautions around contacting each other, we should continue to be really careful to avoid the spread of infection. We should use masks, we should use hand hygiene, and we should avoid close contact with other people, particularly indoors, because otherwise we will see a return of cases and potentially hospitalizations as well.
OK, Professor Finn, good to talk to you this morning. Thank you. Just want to bring you some breaking economic news for you this morning. Let's head straight to our business correspondent, Helen Ann Smith, who's in the newsroom. What have you got, Helen Ann?
Morning. So we've had figures this morning for GDP, gross domestic product. It's the total value of all products and services in the economy, the best barometer we have really to take the temperature of how the economy is doing. We have trade figures as well, which I'll take you through in a minute. But GDP first. The figures for February show that the economy actually recovered a smidge in the month of February, grew by 0.4%. Actually, some relatively good news given the fact that vast swathes of the economy were still completely shut in the month to February. And we've seen lots of months, haven't we, with big dramatic falls over the last year during the crisis. It might reflect a few things, the rollout of the vaccine, businesses getting used to operating under lockdown, the fact that the furlough scheme has been continued, and that all adds to confidence. So a small recovery there. Worth, of course, saying, though, that we're still down 7.8% on what it was in February last year, and still significantly below the sort of post-crisis recovery peak, which was seen in October. So some way to go, but a smidge of encouraging news there. But all eyes as well this morning will have been on the trade figures that were also released by the Office for National Statistics. Now, these really mattered this month because it's the month of February that we're seeing. It is the second month of figures we've seen since the Brexit trade deal came into force. And last month, in January, the first month under that new deal, figures for imports and exports to the EU fell off dramatically, record falls on what we've seen since these records began. A slight recovery today, and I think there'll be sighs of relief within the government and elsewhere. Exports recovered by, exports increased by £3.7 billion. That's an increase of 46.6%. They'd fallen by £5.7 billion in January. So a decent recovery, certainly not back to what they were pre the Brexit trade deal coming into force, but I suspect there'll be a little relief from government for sure. OK,
Helen Ann, thank you. Now, still to come this morning, we're going to be reporting from India, where a huge festival based by the River Ganges has attracted millions of people in a country facing an upsurge in COVID cases. Also, how a 7-year-old Henry has inspired other children to provide for those in poverty. And at 8:40, I'll be talking to TV presenter Laura Hamilton about the average price of a house reaching a record high since the start of the pandemic. Now, demonstrators have clashed with police in Minnesota for a second night after a 20-year-old black man was shot by a police officer. Sally Lockwood reports on the protest where tear gas and rubber bullets were used.
For a second night, people clashed with police after the death of another black man by another of their officers. Peaceful protest turned to looting and violence at an already tense time for this city. Body cam footage showing the unfathomable events unfold. A routine traffic stop ending in death.
An officer shooting a 20-year-old black man, they say by mistake. She intended to use her taser. Father of one, Dante Wright, died after being shot by a single bullet. His family attended a vigil ahead of another curfew order. Dante's mother addressing the crowd.
My heart is literally broken into 1,000 pieces, and I don't know what to do or what to say. But I just need everybody to know that he is much more than this.
The sight of George Floyd's family lawyer here perhaps said it all.
Mr. Crump, your reaction to the death of Dante Wright?
Unnecessary, just so unnecessary. This young man never should have been killed by the police. That's why we have to get the George Floyd Justice and Policing Accountability Act passed.
Just 10 miles away, former officer Derek Chauvin is on trial for the murder of George Floyd. His younger brother giving emotional evidence as the family sat through more tough testimony.
Had he not been restrained in the way in which he was, I think he would have survived that day.
Amid anxiety over the outcome of this trial, they're already calling for justice for another.
Will you be back tomorrow night?
Yes, ma'am, of course. I'm going to be out here every day. I'm going to be out here until they give us some justice. Until they make a change, I'm going to be out here.
A familiar war of fireworks, tear gas and rubber bullets.
For many here, this is a story they've seen before. Same story, just a different name. And a story that doesn't feel like it has an ending.
But it feels like the start of another unsettling chapter for this city. Sally Lockwood, Sky News, Minneapolis.
Well, you can see continuous coverage of the Derek Chauvin trial streaming live on our website and app, on YouTube and on a special pop-up channel you can find on Sky 524. And more than 100 MPs gave eulogies to the Duke of Edinburgh alongside the Parliaments of London, Edinburgh and Cardiff yesterday. Prince William and Prince Harry separately paid tribute to Prince Philip, with William describing his grandfather's life as one defined by service. Well, you can watch full coverage of Prince Philip's funeral here on Sky News this Saturday at 2 o'clock. Ireland has announced that the AstraZeneca vaccine will only be given to those people aged 60 and over. Concerns over rare blood clots has caused many European countries to limit their use of the vaccine. The Irish government is in the process of completing the rollout amongst those over 70 and plans to move to the over 65s later this month. New research into the coronavirus variant first detected in Kent and now dominant in the UK has found it's more transmissible but doesn't increase the severity of the illness. Two studies found no evidence that people with the variant have worse symptoms or are more likely to develop long COVID. A student who shot at police officers in Tennessee High School has been killed. Authorities say the Knoxville student was found in a bathroom and, when ordered to leave, opened fire. The pupil died at the school after being shot by police. An officer was injured after being hit in the leg. The government will face new pressure to reveal more about David Cameron's lobbying activities today when it faces questions from Labour over the collapsed financial firm Greensill Capital. Ali Fortescue is here for us this morning. I mean, this is not going away. Labour seems determined to keep the pressure on.
That's right. The saga continues and Labour are forcing an urgent question in the Commons today. They wanted to see Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, answering those questions. Instead, it is going to be a junior business minister, but they've made very clear, as you say, they're not going to let up pressure. They are not happy with the independent inquiry that the government said was being announced yesterday. They want more scrutiny for those ministers like Rishi Sunak and Matt Hancock that had been lobbied by the former Prime Minister David Cameron. Rishi Sunak, of course, we saw those texts earlier this week about the COVID loan scheme. The Health Secretary, who he'd had a drink with, about an app that was later rolled out in the NHS. It is worth reminding people that David Cameron has already been cleared by the lobbying watchdog. He has always said that he hasn't done anything wrong, he didn't break the rules, but admits that it doesn't look good. And I think, there's a real irony, of course, that David Cameron is someone who went out of his way to say that lobbying was the next big scandal to happen. Here he is right at the centre of this scandal. But I think this is going to become about much more than just Cameron and Greensill, but it's really going to focus minds on the murky world of lobbying more broadly, I think.
OK, Ali, thank you. Now, Japan's government has started releasing massive amounts of treated radioactive water from the wrecked Fukushima nuclear plant. The controversial move is facing opposition from those living close to the site. Well, let's talk to Tom Cheshire, who's standing by for us this morning, hopefully, somewhere. Anyway, Tom hopefully can hear us. And Tom, I mean, clearly this is a controversial move, but we're told, aren't we, that this wastewater is now absolutely safe?
It's not absolutely safe. It does meet some of the minimum thresholds. Just to say, this hasn't started yet. It's supposed to start in a couple of years, and it'll take decades to do. And this is a solution that is causing a lot of disapproval from people in the region. But the problem is a really big one. There's a huge amount of radioactive water on site, both that was used to cool Fukushima nuclear plant before its multiple meltdowns, and also groundwater, rainwater that's been seeping in since then. It's about 1.25 million tonnes, 500 Olympic-sized swimming pools of contaminated water. And it costs around $1 billion to store every year. So the solution being proposed by Japan is that they let it out into the ocean, taking out as much of the radioactive elements as they can, apart from tritium, which is one radioactive element. It's very hard to separate. That will be in there, but they say they'll dilute it, and therefore it will be safe to release into the ocean. Other countries in the region, Japan's neighbours, are very concerned about this. Taiwan, South Korea saying they don't want this water release. China has called it extremely irresponsible and says that Japan is not looking after environmental protections as much as it should be. Now, this hasn't happened yet. It still has 2 years before it happens, but it's already a huge source of contention within the region. As we get close to that date when it actually releases this water, it dumps it into the sea, I think there's going to be a lot more friction here in East Asia.
OK, Tom, thank you. Well, just to remind you, you can keep up with stories like this on the Daily Climate Show here on Sky News every weekday at 6:30 and 9:30. Now, how about this for a hair-raising tale? He's said to be the biggest rabbit in the world, but he's been stolen from his home in Worcestershire. Police believe Darius, a Flemish giant, was taken from his enclosure in Staunton on Saturday night. The owner has offered a £1,000 reward for Darius, who's recognised by the Guinness World Records as being the longest living rabbit, measuring 129 centimetres from nose to tail. Why would you steal a rabbit? Crazy. Let's have a look at the weather for you now. Here's Joe.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Hello there, good morning to you. Well, the weather's looking really quite quiet for the middle of the week. High pressure in control, and so we're not really looking at any surprises. However, we will still see some rather cold nights and widespread frost. No more so than this morning when we've got -4, -5 over parts of the country, but also some lovely sunshine to go with that. Now, there is a little more cloud over parts of Ireland, Wales, the southwest, parts of northern England too. Few isolated showers around. Those showers will become more widespread through the course of the day, but we're not looking at masses. And if you do catch one, well, it will be quite sharp, or might be quite sharp, with the odd bit of hail mixed in. But we've lost the winteriness, which is good news. And temperatures quite generally into double figures, 11 to 13 degrees Celsius. Locally, we could find 14, that's 57 degrees Fahrenheit. And so those showers extend a little further eastwards through the day, then into the evening, they start to die away once more, and the cloud will melt as well, which means if you're looking at sitting outside this evening, best take a jumper or a coat with you, because temperatures will drop quite rapidly once night falls. So again, we're looking at a widespread frost for Wednesday morning, some mist and fog around as well, and then very much a rerun of today. We're looking at a few showers developing. Again, the focus will be on these western areas, eastern parts of Ireland, and temperatures again into double figures, a high of around 14 Celsius.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Joe, thank you. Still to come on Sky News Breakfast, as India is experiencing its worst pandemic surge. We'll talk to a health expert about the situation in the country and how it compares to others.
Police have just made their first move and they've gone in firing tear gas.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. There are hundreds of these turbines, but thousands more across Gansu. That's what's left of the North Tunnel, where the North Koreans exploded 5 nuclear warheads.
This is a show of strength at a time when China is more fragile than it has been at any time in recent years.
Shrapnel from that explosion, so you can see it littered along all the way.
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world. The train station and the airport, they're both closed. We're not sure about the roads. We've seen reports that they are being blocked by police, so we're going to try and find a way out of Wuhan. After 5 days stranded here, this is deliverance. We help you understand the world with us. Tom Cheshire, Sky News, Beijing.
Now, India's Kumbh Mela festival is attended by tens of millions of people, and this year, in spite of the pandemic, it's no different. Hindus from right across the region have begun their pilgrimage to celebrate along the river Ganges. Now, with a total of over 13.5 million cases, India has overtaken Brazil to become the second most affected country globally by coronavirus. Only the United States has a higher number of cases, with 31.2 million. Now, despite more than 3 million people a day getting COVID vaccines, that equates to less than 6% of the country, sparking worries that large gatherings like the Kumbh Mela festival could exacerbate the situation. The festival is one of the main events in the Hindu calendar, but comes at a time where India is experiencing its worst surge in new infections since the pandemic began, seeing more than 130,000 new cases every day. This year, the festival is taking place in the northern city of Haridwar, from where Neville Lazarus reports.
A congregation of millions for this once-in-12-year Hindu festival of the Mahakumbh. Devotees have descended from all parts of the country on the banks of the river Ganga for a holy dip. All this amidst a raging pandemic. India now records the highest number of daily cases in the world and is second only to the United States with over 13.5 million cases. The festival allowed by the Hindu Nationalist Party of Prime Minister Modi has come under severe criticism. Millions of pilgrims from all corners of the country are here. Health experts have flagged this as a super spreader, as it's impossible to implement any COVID restrictions in this large crowd. The reality is that the administration is struggling. There is a rush to reach the main banks before the auspicious time passes. The police are overwhelmed. Saraswati and her husband have travelled hundreds of miles from Rajasthan.
बोला भीड़ बहुत ज़्यादा रहेगी, आप कैसे जा रहे हो? मैं कि जो होगा यहाँ बैठे घर में बैठे ही कोरोना हो रहा है लोगों को, बाहर जाएंगे तो होना होगा तो हो जाएगा, बाहर क्या डर है? जाना एक बार है, जाना तो एक बार है ही है अपन को, अच्छा जैसे भगवान की इच्छा होगी वैसे हो जाएगा।
कोरोना हमें रोक नहीं पाई, आस्था कोरोना के ऊपर भारी पड़ी।
For many weeks, the country has been immersed in state elections. The Prime Minister, his cabinet and leaders of all political parties are campaigning at rallies with thousands in attendance. Roadshows by politicians expose every nook and corner. India's vaccination process started slow but has picked up pace. There is a long way to go, as less than 1% of the population have completed their full dose. Events like these could be avoided at a time when the country is in the grip of a deadly second wave. The rising numbers do not bode well for a nation which has poor public health facilities and services. Neville Lazarus, Sky News, Haridwar.
Well, let's talk to Professor and Head of Life Course Epidemiology at the Public Health Foundation of India, Dr. Giridhar Babu, along with global health expert at Oxford University, Dr. Peter Drobach, who we can talk to about the situation in Chile. Good to see you both this morning. Dr. Babu, clearly the situation in India is hugely concerning with these absolutely massive crowds gathering. Why do you think the message is not resonating in India?
Yeah, I think there are more problems than what India could anticipate now. Once the cases were absolutely at its lowest during December and almost the end of January, there was a feeling of maybe we have won over the virus, and therefore the elections were announced. And also this Kumbh Mela that you are showing is a very cultural and religious belief. And if you could listen to one of the participants at the Mela, Mrs. Saraswati, she said, anyway, I have to die. I might as well come to the Mela and then see God. God will take care. So this kind of cultural belief is very difficult to shake, and you could not probably prevent a Mela like this. But currently, what happens in terms of the COVID-19 response in India will hold key for how well the entire world wins over this battle, mostly because higher the circulation, more might be the new variants developing. Second, either in terms of controlling mortality, especially in the states with a poor health system response, it's going to be a challenge. I think we need to regroup and reprioritize in terms of lowering the mortality because the numbers that we are seeing are much larger and at a much faster pace compared to the first wave.
Yeah, I was going to say, what sort of mortality rate are you looking at, and what sort of condition are the health services in across India, especially the ICU, the intensive care departments? Are they completely overwhelmed now?
Yeah, so based on our experience in the first wave, because of the nationwide lockdown, many states at the entire country level have stepped up their response in having more ventilators, ensuring that there are more oxygenated beds. So therefore, many states are able to cope up with the surge in cases to a greater extent. However, there are some states where traditionally there is poor health system infrastructure. Currently, the mortality rate is not really high in the second wave, But this might change very soon, because once there is a surge and then there is not enough infrastructure to cater to the surging cases, especially the severe cases, then the mortality can go high. But so far, nearly 90% of the infections are asymptomatic, and most people who are infected are in the young age groups. Therefore, we are okay so far in terms of mortality, but we have to contain it right now to have this advantage as we move forward.
OK, so that's the situation in India. Let's turn our attention to Chile, which is causing a lot of concern, actually. Dr. Drobach, why are we seeing this situation in Chile, which has had a hugely successful vaccination programme, as far as we understand it, and now seeing a huge surge in cases? What's going on?
Thanks for having me. This is a really important cautionary tale, I think, as we move forward with our vaccination campaign. So Chile, as you mentioned, has been considered a real COVID vaccination success story. In population-adjusted terms, is about third in the world, behind Israel and the UAE, actually a little bit ahead of the UK. About 40% of Chileans have received 1 dose and 25% 2 doses of the vaccine. At the same time, they're currently experiencing a surge that is the worst surge of COVID they've experienced throughout this pandemic, and in fact, recently went into a hard lockdown. And what's happened was, as the vaccination rollout was even progressing fairly quickly, they really let down their guard. And so social distancing restrictions were relaxed very early on. The summer holidays back in January were allowed to happen, and border restrictions were eased. And in general, I think there was a lot more travel within the country and mixing. And so what happened was infections began to rise well before any kind of protective effect of having a portion of the population vaccinated happened. And they're now paying the price for that. I think it's a reminder for all of us that vaccines are so important, but they alone won't be enough for us to end this pandemic, that vaccines need to go hand in hand with smart public health measures. Here in the UK, we still face a risk of another surge of infections if we're not very careful about how we open up.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that, because I know a lot of MPs here have said, that we need to be driven by the data and not by the dates on all of this. I mean, reiterating what the PM said in effect, but they're saying the data is so good at the moment, we can accelerate the easing of restrictions. We are saying the lesson from Chile is, no, we can't.
That's right. We have to be very careful. We often hear about things like a herd immunity threshold. The reality is, for vaccines to sort of tamp down a pandemic, it depends a lot how many cases you have. And so the vaccines are much more effective at protecting us when case rates are very low, as they are now, versus when they're very high. And so that's a really important thing. If you look back to just 2 weeks ago, the chief medical officer told us in no uncertain terms, there will be another surge of infections sometime in July and August. All of the SAGE modeling predicts this. The question is just how big and exactly when it will happen. So as we continue to open up, that will happen. We also have to remember that our vaccination campaign here in the UK has really slowed down quite significantly the last couple of weeks because of a shortage of supply. And so I think there are going to be some really difficult decisions that need to be made about whether that slowing rate of vaccination means we need to think about that timeline for reopening.
In terms of Chile, are we seeing the situation that there might be a surge in cases, but obviously with a lot of people vaccinated, is that then translating into a surge in serious cases and an increase in deaths?
It's a little bit early, but we certainly are seeing a significant rise in the number of hospitalizations, and they've increased the number of ICU beds, and those are getting overwhelmed. So as we've always seen, it's cases first, then hospitalizations, then deaths that are rising. That certainly does appear to be the case. Now, there is a shifting younger in the demographics of new cases, because like everywhere, Chile was mostly vaccinating older adults first. But when you see a surge to this level, eventually you're going to end up with people in the hospital, and you're going to end up with an increase in deaths.
OK. Dr. Drobach and Dr. Babu, good to talk to you both this morning. Thank you. Now, how's that for a lesson for us all as we celebrate, the easing of lockdown restrictions? If we aren't careful, we could end up like Chile, and that's what the experts are saying. So it's really worth bearing in mind at the moment. Now, the pandemic, we know, has put a dent in efforts to cut back on plastic pollution. It's thought that in the last 12 months, almost 20 billion disposable masks have been used in the UK alone. Now, one company is working to turn discarded PPE into new products, including school chairs and toolboxes. Dan Whitehead reports.
The pandemic and plastic have gone hand in hand. Millions of single-use face masks, gowns and curtains have been vital to the fight against COVID, but it's created thousands of tons of waste. One company in Cardiff thinks it has the solution. 6 NHS hospitals have already taken delivery of their specialist machines that convert used PPE into reusable plastic.
We have a number of trusts now using our machines and specifically to take out the plastics and also the face masks, which has become a huge problem in the current pandemic. You take Royal Cornwall, for instance, they're using 10,000 masks a day.
Instead of being incinerated or going to landfill, thermal heating is used to melt down the PPE.
We've got around 3,000 faulty single-use face masks here. What happens is they go inside the machine at the hospital for around an hour. What comes out is this 20-kilogram block of plastic. It's being reused already to make things like toolboxes and new school chairs.
The aim to go full circle on PPE waste. At the start of the pandemic, the World Health Organization called on governments and manufacturers to increase single-use PPE production by 40%. In China, output of masks soared to 116 million per day in February last year, around 12 times the usual amount. One study suggests that in the last 12 months, 19.2 billion single-use face masks have been used in the UK alone, weighing around 55,000 tonnes. To put that into context, the weight of face masks used in the UK in the last year is equivalent to around 37,000 cars. A huge amount, but still a tiny proportion of the 220 million tonnes of waste the UK produces every year.
There has been an increase in PPE that we're all well aware about. But the system, the waste management system, has coped. It's a very resilient system. We are not talking about huge amount of volumes of material compared to the overall amount that we're handling for the UK as a whole in any given year.
There is little sign of PPE demand falling. Being able to turn this COVID waste into something new could be the long-term solution. Dan Whitehead, Sky News in Cardiff.
And you can catch up with plenty of stories like these on the Daily Climate Show here on Sky News every weekday at 6:30 and 9:30. Still to come on breakfast, I'm going to be talking to a 7-year-old boy who's on a mission to help those in poverty.
From the 1st of November 1939 until the end of the war, I was living under Nazi occupation. And I went through all the things that followed, which was ghetto, first labor camps, then concentration camps, and I ended up in Bergen-Belsen when I was liberated by the British Army. It gets worse as time goes on and one thinks back. And although it's also becoming sort of unbelievable, I thought, how could all that happen? But nevertheless, it's still very painful. It never really goes away. It is very important that people are aware and that they know, that they're educated about what can happen when a civilization breaks down, when a despot rules, when there is prejudice and discrimination. It all starts very slowly. I mean, it was a long process of over 5.5 years. But I don't know, it's difficult to sort of accept that the whole world stood by and well, nothing happened for 5.5 years. looking back on it, it is very horrific. But I won't say, I obviously believe it, I've been through it. And that's why I'm talking. And I think it's important for people to know what happened and not to be bystanders and to take action and to really care about what's going on in the world. And much as we do, very often nothing, no help comes. Well, no help came to us for 5.5 years. But I know it was a terrible war. It was a war where so much happened. There's so much to learn about it. And hopefully that, it could be avoided with enough education and people taking action.
For the early risers.
As we examine the story beyond the headline.
For the knowledge seekers.
Welcome to Divided States.
For the straight talkers, the curious, and the ones who want to be entertained.
Backstage, Sky News' entertainment podcast.
For wherever you are.
Welcome to Sophie Ridge on Sunday podcast.
For the ones who want to know more.
Welcome to the All Out Politics podcast.
For the listeners.
From Sky News Storycast.
Sky News Podcasts. Listen and subscribe for free.
Did you know that air pollution isn't just bad for the environment, it's bad for our health too?
The weather's looking very quiet over the next few days, mostly fine by day, but still frosty by night. And certainly for today, we'll see cloud building up over some western areas, and this will bring a scattering of showers. Temperatures up to around 12 degrees Celsius for many, but perhaps 13 or 14 for some. In terms of air pollution, the levels are likely to be low, and indeed they stay low in the immediate forecast period, but could rise to moderate in the west as we get to the weekend.
The Air Quality Report, sponsored by Philips Air Purifiers.
Now, at the start of lockdown, Henry Sinclair began collecting food in a box outside his home for people who live in poverty and needed extra food. It was a huge success, and a year on, the donation box is still overflowing. Now, even more remarkably, when he came up with the idea, Henry was 6. Now he's the grand old age of 7, and he's been recognised for his efforts with a special award. Well, Henry and his mum, Katie, join us now. Really good to see you both. Look, how did you come up with this idea, Henry?
Because in lockdown, I started to do this so people didn't go hungry because they couldn't go to the shops. So I asked Piddington to drop food off on their daily walks.
Do you think you're quite a lucky boy? You've got enough to eat at home?
Yes.
Mum, in all of this, I'd love to know what your first thought was when this was suggested to you.
Well, initially it was just a question. Henry, we were sat on the sofa, regular day, as we were trying to process the start of lockdown last year, and he just said, "Mum, what happens now? I can't go to the supermarket. I can't donate in their drop boxes at the supermarket." So I was like, "Okay, let's have a think. Let's see what we could do." And came up with putting the box outside the house and just asking our local village to, on their daily walks, wasn't it? To drop a can off. And we said that we could help that way. And the overwhelming support from the village has been incredible. Within like the first 24 hours, the box was overflowing, and it still does to this day. So it's pretty incredible, really.
Were you surprised, Henry, when the first day when you saw the box was full?
Yes, I was very surprised because it was just my first time and the box was overflowing.
What do you think then, Henry, of the people in your village who walk past your house every day and pop something in the box for other people?
Well, it's very good because then we can go and drop it off at the one camp base for them to give to people who don't have much food.
Tell you what, Mom, you've brought up a young boy here with the right attitude, haven't you? You must be very proud of him.
Oh, just listen to him speak there. You know, he's so passionate. This has been, we are incredibly proud of Henry because it's not a chore. This is something that he feels really passionate about. And, you know, every day he'll pop out down to the box, check if the box is full and say, you know, go and sort it out. And off he goes. He puts on his gloves and sorts it all out. And he was a little bit sad when we went back to school because he couldn't do the 1 can drop. So we couldn't take it to 1 can because he's at school in those hours. But he looks forward to the holidays when we can do it together again.
Yeah.
But now the 1 Can Trust Foundation has decided that you're a street hero, Henry. How does it feel to be a hero?
It's good.
You're a good hero, aren't you? Yes. Not all heroes have capes, though, do they?
You're a very modest hero. You're a very modest hero. But it just goes to show, doesn't it, Katie, that, you know, if people can donate the smallest amounts, a single can, it can so quickly add up.
Absolutely, absolutely. Every week. So, as you said, we've been doing this a year. So we're celebrating 52 drops. We do every week. And what's incredible is that people have become really thoughtful in their donations as well. And, you know, opening up and making sure that we're getting things of dietary requirements, you know, gluten-free stuff, dairy-free stuff. So everyone has something to receive that, you know, that do have dietary needs. So, yeah, it's incredible. And it does add up. Every can counts.
It's quite something as well. I mean, I don't know how big your village is, but for the people there, I mean, you're a sort of village of heroes, aren't you?
Absolutely, yeah. Aren't we? Yeah, Henry will quite often stand on the doorstep, and if he sees someone dropping off, he'll shout out, "Thank you." He is. You're grateful, aren't you? Well, we're all grateful. 1 Can's grateful. You're grateful. Yeah. Keeps you busy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So how long are you going to keep this going, do you think? Is this something that's going to happen every week from here on in?
Well, I'm only going to do it until 1 Can tell me to stop doing it. So basically, as long as they need me.
I'm sure that could be a very long time. Look, really good.
Henry's got one.
Oh, God.
Henry's got one aspiration, following on from being a street hero, is that for insurance purposes, he can't join them in the warehouse. But when he's 8, he's allowed to go in, aren't you?
Yes.
Well, not long to wait for that. Only another 12 months and you'll be in there being able to have a look round. Really good to see you both this morning. And well done, Henry. I think you show us all what we need to be doing. You're an inspiration.
Having a yawn.
Well, it is early. It is early. It does go to show that we should all sort of make the effort, and a little bit can really make a big difference. Anyway, let's see what the weather's going to do for you today. Morning, Joe. I've heard you say this morning it's quiet weather-wise.
It is. It's very quiet. High pressure in control, so much calmer, much more settled than it has been. What I can't promise at the moment are temperatures recovering too much. They're pretty much back to what they should be for the time of year during the day, but overnight we're still seeing frosts, so be warned. Let's take a look at the details.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Hello there, good morning to you. Well, really, say high pressure in control. For most, it's going to be calm, it's going to be settled. We'll see some sunshine, also a scattering of showers, these mostly in the west, and top temperatures of around 12 or 13 degrees Celsius. That's 55 degrees Fahrenheit.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.